Welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KSL Sports. What a time to be alive. Man, the last 2 days have just been absolutely insane. Obviously, the NCAA tournament getting underway, all of the Utah basketball news, Utah football kicking off spring ball, and man, it's just been action-packed. And so there's a lot to talk about. So in this one, We'll dive into Alex Jensen's return to the University of Utah as the Utah men's head basketball coach. We'll talk about the strategic hire of Raphael Chillious, who comes to Utah from the Memphis Grizzlies, but has just an incredible resume on the recruiting trail at the collegiate level. So we'll talk about that. I'll answer we'll do a little Q&A, just answering some questions about whatever you guys have. And so that'll be fun. And then we'll dive into whatever else. But first, before we get into all that, Utah women's basketball unfortunately fell in the first round of the NCAA women's tournament. They lose 76-68 to the number 9 seed Indiana Hoosiers. And so Utah's season comes to an abrupt end. And unfortunately, Utah just kind of struggled down the home stretch. They lost, I believe, 4 of their last 6 games, and really just kind of limped to the finish line, unfortunately. But with today's loss, it's tough. Obviously, this women's program has come a long ways from where it used to be, and I think with everything that they experienced this year, Lynn Roberts moving on to the WNBA, three games into the season, accepting that job with the LA Sparks, you never knew really how this team would handle it. There was, you don't want to take for granted Gavin Peterson's ability to just keep this team on the tracks. But he did that. And I think for him being a first-year head coach, to be able to do that with a team that had high expectations, I think is encouraging. Obviously, you would love to see more from the Utah women's basketball team, in these moments in the NCAA tournament and the Big 12 tournament. But I think given this being Peterson's rookie season, and all of the emotion that the women's team had to fill with Lynn Roberts moving on, I think he did a good job again of keeping this train on the tracks, and I think the future's bright. He did a good job of keeping that recruiting class together with L.A. Snead and Avery Heimstead and Ella Todd, who are all three really promising prospects, but Snead and Heimstead in particular are 2 top 40 talents in the recruiting class this year. So to bring them into the program is exciting. To keep this momentum moving forward with the program, they're going to have to hit the transfer portal pretty hard to address some of the loss in size. But I think there's a lot to be excited about with this Utah women's program. So tough loss, but still the future is bright. And I think everything sort of hinges on Gianna Niebken's decision of whether to, move on to the WNBA or potentially enter the transfer portal or return for her final season. And I anticipate that being the move, but you just don't know. So we'll see what happens, but I still think the future is quite bright with that Utah women's basketball program. And while we're on the subject of basketball and the University of Utah, obviously the biggest news this week is the official return of Alex Jensen to the Running Utes program as the head coach of the basketball program. And this is pretty significant. This is a big moment for the program for a number of different reasons, right? This Alex has long been the sort of dream hire for those around the program. And, after kind of going through it and trying to bring him in 4 years ago, the timing just didn't fit each other quite well. I think Alex felt that he was close to getting an NBA head coaching gig, and He had some personal things that he was going through as well with his family, and good things, not bad, but good things. And I just think the timing didn't sync up for that to happen 4 years ago. And frankly, with hindsight being 2020, I think both have come out better for it in terms of the potential for this Jensen and taking over as the head coach of the Utah men's basketball. I think this really now becomes the perfect storm, perfect timing for this to come together. With how the college landscape has transformed over the last 2 to 3 years with NIL and all of that. Utah, they've always been sort of slow to adapt and to adjust. They're not ones to jump into things like that all fast and loose like some other programs. But I think with now the fan base and the supporters around the program, and with the way that college athletics is trending with this House versus NCAA settlement on the horizon, I think Utah itself is in a much better place with NIL and the resources needed to compete, with Jensen coming in now rather than 4 years ago. So I think, this is significant. And with Jensen and the time that he spent in the NBA, when you talk to folks about him that know him from that level, there's nothing but really great things that they have to say about him. A lot of his duty at that level revolves around game planning and installation of those game plans. And I think he's done a fantastic job of those things, which are evident in, the success that the Dallas Mavericks have had, that the Utah Jazz had under him and Quinn Snyder. And I think he's really developed as a coach. And I think when you look at Alex's resume, you go back 10, 12 years ago now, he was a head coach of the Canton Charge in the G League. And I think that is something that, he'll rely on, his experience that he gained there. That'll obviously help him moving forward into this role. But, he, in his press conference, I think you could tell that, there were some nerves, and I think he felt the nerves, and that's understandable. You don't need to win the press conference. As Nick Sirianni has shown us all, that you can bomb a press conference and come out great from it. And I think there was some concern about how Alex looked and presented himself. Not that it was worrisome, but just the excitement wasn't there that other programs have had with a coach in their opening introductory press conference. But I think Alex is the type that, he's going to get more comfortable and more confident the more he does those types of things. And, he's just, he is who he is. And he was genuine. I thought he came across really genuine and honest with a lot of his responses and how he feels a basketball program should be built. And I think having that genuineness and that honesty at the forefront of the program, I think is huge for Utah. Alex, going back to his playing days, he wasn't the best athlete. He wasn't the most talented, but he was just the dude that did things the right way, that put in the work to find success. He didn't cut corners. He didn't take shortcuts. And I think that'll be evident in his coaching style and how he goes about building this program. And I think that's going to speak to a lot of Utah fans who appreciate effort and energy and, all of those types of qualities. I think those are things that Utah people, not just Utah fans, but Utah people in general, appreciate and come to respect the most, are those types of qualities. So I think, with his background and the way that he's come up, he's had to earn each and every opportunity. And I think he is absolutely the right guy for the job. And with him, I wrote my story on the Utah season ticket sales. And I think that trend is going to continue over the coming months, and I'm excited to revisit that down the road with Utah to see the actual impact of Alex Jensen on those season ticket requests and where they end up being. And I think it's important for fans to understand that, that investment, having season tickets and going to games is so important because, this revenue sharing isn't just money from TV contracts. It's all of the above. It's everything. So the more that, fans invest into the program in however many ways that comes, I think that's going to, promote the health of Utah athletics and Utah basketball specifically. And I think with this new influx of excitement around the program, I think Utah has, done a really good job so far of capitalizing on it. And I think that's going to be key moving forward is they've got to continue to roll, ride this wave. And I think with what we've seen with this latest hire for Utah basketball, I think that speaks to continuing to ride this wave of momentum as Utah announced the hiring of assistant coach Raphael Chillious, who comes to Utah from the Memphis Grizzlies, which is exciting. Just that sentence alone, adding an assistant coach from the NBA is exciting because that he's going to come here with a deep understanding of the game of basketball. But then you actually look at his resume and what he's accomplished in his time over the course of his career. He spent 2 lengthy stints at the University of Washington from 2009 to 2012, and then again from 2013 to 2017. In between those 2 stints, he spent a year with Villanova, which he played a vital role in recruiting, guys like Josh Hart and a couple other key pieces that eventually helped lead Villanova to a national title in 2016. During his time with Washington, he played a key role in recruiting, a guy like Isaiah Thomas, who was originally from Tacoma, Washington, but actually spent time at South Kent, where Chillious originally came up as a coach. It's a prep basketball program in the Northeast, and he continued to recruit at a really high level with Washington. There are other names. Markelle Fultz was arguably the top prospect that he brought into that Washington program. DeJounte Murray, he played a big role in that as well. And everywhere he's been, he's done wonders in terms of the recruiting and bringing an influx of talent. It wasn't just Washington and Villanova. He also ended up at the University of Connecticut, where he helped bring in a couple of talented pieces there as well. And then Eastern Carolina, he was the associate head coach for a year and brought in the type of talent that landed Eastern Carolina a top 10 class in the recruiting rankings. East Carolina with the top 10 recruiting class. So I think that specifically speaks to the sort of recruiting prowess that Chillious brings to the program. And there's a lot of excitement, and you can see it in some of the responses from national media members, such as Fran Fraschilla, who said, and I quote, "Wow, great start for Alex Jensen. Coach Chill is in the Big 12 Conference." Joe Tipton of On3 said, and I quote, "Utah's Alex Jensen makes a power move by hiring a veteran in the world of evaluating, developing, and coaching high-level players. Expect an immediate talent infusion in Salt Lake City." Joe Tipton is the guy for college basketball recruiting at On3. He's the guy doing all the edits and all that sort of stuff for these guys. He's as connected on the recruiting trail as anybody, and to get that sort of ringing endorsement from Joe Tipton, that speaks volumes of what Utah's getting in terms of the recruiting prowess that Chillious brings to the table. But even more than that, our own Tony Jones here local, our local hero, Tony Jones, grew up playing basketball with Coach Chillious and called it a monster hire. So if Tony is given that stamp of approval, it's a big deal. So this is big. This is a pretty significant move for Alex Jensen, and I think it was also honestly, I think it was the best move that he could have made. Nobody knew who Raphael Chillious was until he was hired. But now that you do your research and you actually look at his background and what he brings to the table, this hire addresses a major question mark with Alex coming into the program and to the collegiate level in general. If you remember during his press conference, he joked about, text messaging becoming a thing in recruiting while he was at St. Louis, and how he was excited to dip out of the college level after that. Well, it's a little different now than it was, 15 years ago. And I think there were a lot of questions in terms of his connections and what he was going to be able to do as a recruiter. So to add a guy that has been dubbed one of the best recruiters in college basketball, to bring that in and to make that the first hire, I think is a significant move for Alex Jensen, because the timing is super important here. Coach Chillious is going to get to work starting next week. And what happens next week? The transfer portal officially opens. So on Monday is when the portal officially opens. It opens from March 24th to April 22nd. We've already seen a lot of announcements of guys that intend to enter the portal, or graduates that plan to enter the portal, but the portal does not officially open until Monday. So with Chillious coming in and starting with Utah next week, that's going to allow him to get to work in recruiting the transfer portal, where he's just got ample connections and relationships that will lead him to guys that Utah can bring in to help kind of remake this roster, as Joe Tipton said, provide an influx of talent into the program. So I think this was a very smart hire for Alex Jensen. I think it was great to address the biggest question mark, in terms of him taking over with the recruiting stuff, to add one of the most accomplished recruiters in college basketball over the last decade. To bring that in is significant. And so the question then becomes, well, what's next for Alex Jensen and his staff? And I think when that question comes up, obviously the longer things go on without an announcement, the more worry starts to set in. But I just want to assure people that, when it comes to Andre Miller, there is I'll just share what I was told most recently. Andre Miller wants to be in Utah. And with that being the case, I believe whatever it's going to require, that it'll eventually get done. It's not done yet, but Andre wants to be in Utah. And I think that is significant in and of itself. Now, the question then becomes, well, what sort of role does Andre want to have? He currently serves as the head coach of the Grand Rapids in the G League, and based on what I've heard, I'm not sure that Andre is wanting to have a significant workload. So what sort of role does he come into? We'll see. But again, it's been reemphasized to me over and over that Andre Miller wants to be here, wants to be a part of this, and wants to help rebuild the University of Utah men's basketball program. So we just have to be patient on that front, but I anticipate that coming together eventually. I thought, honestly, to be fully transparent, that we would see something this week even, but it'll happen in its time. And again, I've been assured many times that Andre wants to be here. So we'll see. So beyond that, I think it's important to understand that, there are 5 assistant coaching spots. So 5 coaches on Alex's bench that can help in practice, help with coaching and development, and then 3 that are designated recruiters. So I think Coach Chillious is going to fill one of those recruiting assistant roles, and that's going to be important to have him on staff. What else do we see with Alex Jensen's staff? I think, assuming that Andre Miller is going to be a part of that, maybe he's one of the assistant coaches, maybe he's not, maybe he's a director of player operations or something like that. I don't know. But we'll just consider him an assistant coach. So we've got 3 spots remaining. And I think, considering the recruiting prowess that Chillious brings to the table, I think it would still make sense for Utah to add another coach, for Jensen to add another coach that has good recruiting ties. perhaps internationally even. And I think that'll be an important area of focus for him and his staff. Jensen isn't going to rush into anything. He's going to take his time. Now that he's got his guy that can kind of lead the charge on the recruiting trail in the transfer portal, that sort of alleviates some of the pressure and stress that I think Utah fans were probably feeling without, this staff in place, with Jensen, remaining committed to the Dallas Mavericks through the end of the season. And fortunately, the Mavericks are tanking as we get to the end of the season. So I think once they get to that final game in April, that'll be it. They do not look to be a playoff contender. So I think once the regular season is over, that'll all come together in about the third week of April. With Andre serving as head coach of the Grand Rapids, their season actually comes to an end pretty soon here. I think by the end of the month. So again, just within the timing there, understanding that, I think it sort of fits everything there. But what else? I've heard that Alex would like to have, at least another assistant with NBA ties. And so, I don't know exactly what else that would be or a name to provide, but I know that Alex would like to have, a pretty good representation from the NBA, and relying on those relationships that he's developed over the years in the league. And I think that'll be vital for Utah to get the most out of the program, right? Because this is still going to be a player development program, and it's still going to be key on, raising the level of play and developing guys and raising the skill level of the guys in the program. That's going to be the focus. So I think bringing in coaches that's their job is to develop and to coach and instruct. I think that's going to be key to all of this. But with the rest of the staff outside of that, I think a GM for Alex Jensen, I think that'll be somebody that Alex probably brings somebody with him from the NBA. I think that would make a lot of sense in having somebody familiar with the role of general manager, somebody that's been in the league, been in a professional setting in sports, understanding the ins and outs and intricacies of contract negotiation even, and all of that, I think is vital to all of this. So, I think it'll come together in its own time. Again, Alex Jensen is not in a rush. He knows that certain decisions have to be made in a more timely manner, as he talked about in his press conference on Monday. But he's going to be diligent. He's going to be careful with his hiring process, because he wants the right guys around him. And I think this hire that he's made with Raphael Chillious speaks to just how mindful he was of that, of having the right people around him, because he's not coming to Utah with great recruiting connections. So he adds somebody that fills that need and addresses that question mark pretty emphatically. So lots still to learn with Jensen and his coaching staff. Without a doubt, though, there is just a lot of excitement around this basketball program, and I think the exciting times will continue to come over the next few weeks and probably a couple of months as they go to work on reconstructing this roster and rebuilding it for 2025-2026. So with all of that in mind, let's switch gears here. Let's talk Utah football. Coach Kyle Whittingham welcomed the media back to the practice facility on Thursday for their first practice of spring ball 2025. And it was good to be back up there with the whole media conglomerate here in Salt Lake City covering the Utes football program. It was good to talk to Kyle Whittingham and the defensive side of the ball. We didn't get to talk to the offensive side. That's strictly for Tuesdays. So for whatever reason, we didn't get to go up there on Tuesday to talk offense, to get our 20-minute practice watching session. We didn't get that this week. We just got the media availability. But still, I think there's good things to take away from what we learned yesterday with talking to Coach Whittingham and the defensive players, and then talking with the assistant coaches today. And I think arguably the most important thing are just the vibes seem so much better around the program right now. There's, it seems like they're genuinely having fun. It seems like there's just good energy and juice. And talking to guys, they're a bit more upbeat. I remember, that losing streak, that sucked. It was not fun. And you could tell it weighed on players and they could feel the pressure and the frustration of the fan base. And I think it was just good to see the guys, having fun, joking around while we were waiting for interviews and all that sort of stuff. Again, we didn't get to watch practice, so we don't know exactly, how that energy and that vibe is translating in practice. But just in talking to the guys, you could feel that there was, good juice, good vibes going on with the football program. So I think first and foremost, with the fan base too, right? I think we've all kind of grown frustrated and exhausted over the last 2 seasons and how it's all gone down. It's been a tough ride for Utah fans. It's been tough, man. It seems like anything that could go wrong did go wrong, and it's tested a lot of us. It's put us through the ringer. It's been brutal. And so I think it's almost to the point where it's hard to believe that, there's positivity, there's upbeat energy and all of that sort of stuff. So, I get it from Utah fans. I understand it because I feel it too. But I'm telling you, with being there and just talking to them, interacting with them, being around them, you could feel that there was just more positivity right now than there was, as that season ended, which, you should expect. But I think still it's just good to hear that. Beyond the vibes, we've also learned that having Devin Dampier, having Jason Beck, spending time all last season, not just time, but spending all last season together, that's allowed them to hit the ground running with the offense. And, even beyond Dampier on the field, having Kerry Rogers and Ryan Davis, who were both part of that New Mexico offense last season, having them in that running back and wide receiver room is also beneficial because they too can point out and say, hey, this is how it's done. This is how we execute that. And Jason Beck talked about that in his availability today, that, those guys can go first in practice reps and show these guys how it's done. Give the rest of the team a good first look at what's being asked of them with certain things in the offense. So I think that's good to have that sort of example, have somebody that knows the offense like these guys do. To have that as Utah, installs the offense, I think is pretty significant. And two, Coach Whittingham made sure to make note of this, that there's been some rule changes that have allowed football programs to essentially conduct walkthroughs and light practices in the lead up to spring ball. And what this allows them to do is it allows them to work on alignments and formations so that they have an understanding of what they're doing. That's a lot of that, having the ability to work on those things prior to spring ball allows them to hit the ground running, essentially jogging, power walking maybe in the first week of spring ball. But I think that rule change is pretty significant and a good thing for Utah to have that extra time to prepare and install the offense. So that was good to hear as well. On the defensive side of the ball, we got to talk to Lander Barton, to Smith Snowden, and to Logan Fano on Thursday. And, you could kind of tell that there's a focus and a determination to raise the standard of play, at Utah in 2025. And I thought Logan Fano put it pretty well, that when you come to Utah, you come here to win and you come here to play great defense. And I think that's such a great mantra, a great model to have. And that's essentially embodies what Utah is all about. You come here to win, you come here to play great defense. And I think, Logan understanding that and saying that, putting it out there, I think speaks to just the mindset of the defense and where they where they felt they finished in 2024 and where they feel they need to improve and get to. They know that they need to be better. And I thought Leonard Barton was honest in assessing where he can improve. And he talked about the need to improve as an open field tackler, and not just himself, but everybody on that team. Tackling was an issue. And though Morgan didn't say it outright, he was questioned about the missed tackles, but I think there's going to be a greater point of emphasis in terms of finishing plays and making plays that, for whatever reason, was just, maybe it was taken for granted last year. But I think there's going to be a greater point of emphasis on finishing and doing things the right way that, when you go through a 5-7 season, you just kind of replay how you went about things, and you kind of get a kick in the butt to do things a little bit better and a little bit cleaner and a little bit sharper. And I think that'll be good for this defense. So, it was good to hear from the defensive players, and they all kind of shared that same sentiment, which I think was good because, that is a unit that played good football. They were a top 20 unit according to ESPN SP+, right? And so it was a unit that did a lot of good things, but we all know that there's still another level, maybe even 2 levels, that this group can get to. And so, excited about all that. And look, light on takeaways, just because there's only so much you can take away from players' comments and all of that. But excited to get up there on Tuesday to get a look at these guys. And I'll be sure to either record a podcast immediately after or go live on Twitter to talk about it. But I want to make sure that I give you guys, good updates on those practice availabilities when we get our 20-minute sessions and all that sort of stuff. So that's my focus, is to do that and just to provide good updates from spring ball. So excited about that. But let's switch gears again. Let's get into some questions. I asked for questions on Twitter, and so I need to be more mindful of social media and where everybody is at. I know we've got Twitter, we've got Threads, we've got Blue Sky, so I'll be better. I'll be more mindful of everybody else that probably listened to this and wondering, well, I didn't see you asking for questions. But the first one from Trevor Hansen: can you speak on what you were able to see with your 20-minute media availability, as well as your favorite offensive and defensive breakout player this year? So yeah, didn't get our 20 minutes this week. That'll be the first one we get on Tuesday. That'll be the first one. So, but I can speak to my favorite offensive and defensive breakout player this year. And, I think there should be a lot of optimism around Wayshawn Parker at running back. I think he's going to, I just think it's a great marriage between his skill set, the offensive line in front of him, and this offensive scheme with Beck, with the option and Devin Dampier and what that'll do for the running game, for the running backs in particular. That'll just do so much to at least give them another split second to scan the offensive line, to find those opportunities, to make the cuts that they need to. And with this offensive line blocking in front of him, it's a massive improvement over what he had blocking for him at Washington State. That Washington State, it's tailored to the passing game. It always is and always will be. But this group at Utah, I think they've got some dogs that'll create some lanes for Parker. So I think he's the guy that should be at the top of everybody's list. But a dark horse offensive guy that I am curious to learn about, Hunter Andrews, man. I think he's got tremendous potential moving to tight end and becoming, that Brant Keithy 2.0 type of kid. Every coach that's coached him, and he started at linebacker, he moved to running back, he moved back to linebacker. Now he's at that, there's been a lot of coaches that have had their hands on him, and coaching him and all that sort of stuff. And every single one raves about just his mindset, his work ethic, his team first mentality. And I think, when you go back and you watch the tape, you watch him at Magnolia, at Magnolia High School, you watch his running back film and you just see the playmaking instincts. And so as long as he takes to the X's and O's of that tight end position, that H-back position, I'm excited for what he could be. But he's still got the guy in front of him, Landon King, who I'm also excited about. I just gave you 3 potential breakout guys. So on offense, on defense, this is going to be interesting because I do think there's a few guys, but I think I'll go with Rabbit Evans. I'm excited to see what he looks like in year 2 at that strong safety position. It took him time to get the defensive scheme, to get where he needed to be mentally with the defensive scheme. But I think having the time in it that he now has, and another year of physical development and refinement, I think he's going to turn some heads this year. So excited to see Rabbit Evans, and then too, Jonathan Hall. I think he's poised for a big step forward in year 2 at linebacker as well. So those are my 2 defensive breakout players. All right, next question. This one from G Ute. What's your prediction for the QB depth chart? What will Nate Johnson's role be? So Devin Dampier 1. I think Isaac Wilson is QB 2. I think Nate Johnson will be your designated QB 3. And then Brendan Zerberg, I think could challenge for QB 2 spot. What'll be interesting with Isaac, I've heard that there's the hope that they can redshirt him this next season, and he can fulfill QB 2 duties while redshirting, which I think could be key. But that's how I sort of see it right now. I think Nate Johnson is going to be, he's going to be used as an athlete. I think Nate, in coming back, is sort of embracing that sort of role more than he maybe had in previous years. But I think he is going to be used as sort of a unique athlete and weapon for Utah. And then too, he similar games to Devin Dampier, right? Can he throw the ball as effectively as Dampier? Now, Dampier, he's not an elite passer, but he's shown the ability to complete a number of quality passes. He completed about 58%, 57% of his throws this past season. That number obviously has to improve, but when you consider the dynamic ability of the 2, I think there's reason to feel optimistic that maybe Nate's QB future isn't horrible, but there's certainly got to be some development from what we saw of him back in 2023. But I think for the most part, look at him as QB 3, and then he'll be used as an athlete and kind of a chess piece type of player. But there should be excitement about Nate and his return at Utah. Next question from Tribute. He's got a couple, actually. What's the most intriguing matchup battle in spring camp? And with the Olympics and Huntsman announcement, is there any chance of expanding RES? I'll answer that one first. I haven't heard of any sort of expansion with Rice-Eccles Stadium, but considering the potential with the Olympics coming, I think there's certainly room where that could become a thing. With the relocation of the Huntsman Center and the building of a new arena, I anticipate that landing somewhere, probably in the west parking lot of Rice-Eccles Stadium. That could mean that there's potentially changes to Rice-Eccles Stadium and all of that, but I have not heard anything in regards to that. But that's not to rule it out. It's just that I haven't heard anything about that specifically yet. But I do think there's potential for it. Now, as far as the other question that you asked, I think the most intriguing matchup battle in spring ball in my eyes is going to be in that defensive secondary and how that shakes out, right? We've talked a lot about Smith Snowden becoming that CB1 type and becoming a truly elite corner. Well, what does that mean for everybody else, right? Because he's been playing nickel. If he's going to be playing more outside, who moves inside? Is that going to be Elijah Scooby Davis? Is that going to be Kwamari Shemwell? Is that going to be one of the bigger guys that they brought in, which I have a hard time seeing because you don't typically see 6'2" plus guys in the slot in the nickel. But I think so I'm fascinated to see how that shakes out in the defensive secondary in that cornerback room. They brought in a lot of length, they brought in a lot of size, and I think that's a really good thing in this defense. It always seems to bode well. So we'll see, but I think there's a lot to sorting out. There's a lot to sort out with that cornerback room specifically. So that's the most intriguing matchup, or not matchup, but position group battle for me going into spring ball this year. A couple more questions. One from our guy Peace, Love, and Utes. Which position group has you feeling like Mr. Milchick heading into spring practices? Man, that's the offensive line. I'm so fired up about the offensive line and the potential of this group. You've got 2 All-Americans in Spencer Fonner and Caleb Lomu. You've got an interior group that is deep. You've got some room for, some position battles, starting battles with, at guard, at center potentially. But I think there's just a ton of confidence with this group and what they bring back, to bring back the whole starting 5 plus the depth behind it, which most of them got reps last year. To have that and now coming into an offense that is really suited for this group in particular quite well, given the variance in run plays where they're running a lot outside, which will highlight the athleticism of this group and the tackles in particular. To run it downhill with Beck, he loves this counter and power run style, and I think that'll be good for Mokofisi and Togiai, who are really good as pullers. So, I think that's the group where I feel the best about. Got me dancing, leading the drum line like Mr. Milchick. And so I'm excited about the offensive line, and I think having Dampier in the backfield with what he accomplished last year, I think is just going to do so much to unlock and free up space at the line of scrimmage for this offensive line, which will allow them to shine. That was the big issue this past season, was that defenses weren't threatened by the quarterback play. And that's not a knock on Isaac. It's just he was a true freshman, new to this level of football, and there's a lot to learn at this level. And so, I think the offensive line, everybody should be feeling good about it. And then last question from HD Ute. Does Alex Jensen want to keep a very long team? Having so many big guys made matchups hard for other teams, but it also made them vulnerable to a certain type of attack. We haven't gotten to talk to Alex. I haven't heard much about, what he's looking for in a roster. But what I have heard is that, his top priorities in terms of this year's squad are Keanu Dawes and Jake Wallin, 2 guys that have size and length. And so, we're going to learn a lot about what Alex is looking for with his roster. I think he understands that length is really important, being at the NBA level and seeing the impact of it and what it can do, at that level. Obviously, you'd think that it will also make an impact here at the college level. But in terms of what else he's looking for, I'm not sure. Not too sure just yet. That is something that we'll just learn over time. But I do think, length, size, those are still going to be important qualities. But I do think there's also, I would assume a realization that Utah needs to be more athletic in this conference, specifically in the backcourt with the guard play. So I think that'll be probably a point of emphasis. And given, again, the hiring of Raphael Chillious it's so big, it's monstrous, because he just has so many recruiting connections. He's such a good recruiter that Utah should be able to get the type of guys they need in this program to help them take that next step into that upper half of the Big 12. So lots to learn about Alex Jensen and what he wants this roster to be. Just haven't heard anything yet in terms of specifics, but just knowing, based on what I have heard so far, and Dawes and Wallin being the top priorities in terms of guys he wants to hang on to from this year's roster, which also Lawson Lovering is a guy that I've heard he wants to keep around. I do think size is important, but also I think athleticism, specifically in the backcourt, is going to be important for him as well. So, man, I appreciate the feedback, appreciate the questions. I know I'm not super consistent with this, so I apologize about that. I apologize each and every time. I know I need to be better and will be better moving forward, especially during spring ball. We'll have lots to talk about. So appreciate you all. Thank you. Signing off.